Hello everybody, welcome to part 4 of the Meteor and Comet video series. In this part we're going to be configuring the drones in Betaflight MBO Heli Suite. You'll need a micro USB cable, a pair of goggles, a transmitter. I'm going to assume that you've already bound the receiver in the drone to a transmitter. If you haven't and you want to know how to do that, you can see the video description where I've bound this Jumper T12 radio to this receiver. You'll need a battery and of course the drone. So first let's get all the software we need. So go to Chrome, type in Betaflight. And Betaflight is a Chrome app, so you just click on it here, and you download the app into Chrome. I've already got it downloaded, so it just says Launch App here, but you would have Install App if you haven't already installed that. So go ahead and do that. Next, we need to get the BL Heli Suite 32. So go to this website here, blheli32.com/download, and download the latest suite here. And the one you want is the BL Heli 32. Current version is 32605 at the time of this video. So go ahead and download and extract those files. The last thing we need to do is to get the manual configuration files. So go to the Hobbymate hobby.com website. You scroll down to the bottom. You'll find a download button here. And if you go down the bottom, you'll find the Hobbymate Comet and Video Instruction Manual, and this also includes the configuration files. So go ahead and download that as well. Okay. So I've already done that, and so here are the configuration files here. So we have the manual. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we hopefully have downloaded this manual early in the video series, but if you haven't, now's a good time to do it. So the manual shows the assembly. It shows how to flash the firmware, which we're going to do. Essentially covers everything that we're covering in the video series. And then we have the configuration files. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so you go ahead and install Betaflight. So now, if you haven't already done it, you need to download the drivers for Betaflight and your flight controller. So here are the drivers here. They're listed on the front page. If you have trouble with this, I'll put some links for some other videos in the description box below that help you out with the drivers, but I won't go into great detail here on that, other than assuming that you have them installed correctly. So go ahead and connect the micro USB cable to your computer and to the drone. What you should see is a COM port show up here at the top. Maybe different on your computer than it is on mine. Go ahead and click connect. Now, if everything's working right, you have your drone connected to the computer, and you can see it moving on the setup tab. So what we're going to do here, this still has the default firmware on it, so we're going to update the firmware. So what you want to do here, there's a little bind button right here on the corner of the flight controller. So we can go ahead and now click connect to make sure that we're just making sure that everything's working right inside Betaflight. So we can unplug the USB cord. Now, sometimes it's easier to unplug the USB cord from your computer, plug this in, hold down that bind button while you're plugging it in to the computer. You already have it plugged into your drone. All right. You know you did it right when it says DFU up here at the top. So now we're going to go to Firmware Flasher. We're going to pick our board. We have the Omnibus F4 FW. We're going to choose the latest firmware. Latest firmware at the time of this video is 3.5.3. We have no boot sequence, full chip erase. So we'll go down here, we'll load the firmware online. We'll go down the bottom here so you can see the progress bar, and we'll click Flash Firmware. All right, it's all done. So now we can see we got the COM port showing up again. We click connect. And now, if you try to move around your drone, it's not moving. That's because we haven't applied the settings yet. So this is where the configuration files come into play. So if we get to the configuration files, there we are. The one you want to choose is going to be dependent on what kind of receiver you have installed and whether you have the ESC board with the battery terminals coming out the back or out the left side. So with this one, I have a RSSI receiver and I have the battery terminals coming out the back. So that would be this one right here, RSSI ESC back. So I just open that up and I'm going to copy all of this information right here, put it on the clipboard. You can minimize this and we'll go over to the CLI and I'll right click in the little box down here at the bottom and I'll hit paste. Now you don't see anything show up there, but if you scroll up here, you can see it's all there. So just go to the very bottom, make sure you're still at the bottom, and you just press enter. And so what that does is that applies that configuration file. So now you got to type save. Otherwise, it won't take effect. It'll disconnect. We'll wait for it to connect back up here. All right. Here we go. So with that configuration file applied, everything's now been set up. So the first thing we want to do is calibrate the accelerometer. You'll see that it levels up. So now is a good time to talk about the configuration file we just used. If you go to the CLI, you type diff down here in the command line. You go up, scroll up to the top. So the diff listing is nothing more than a list of the differences between the firmware stock settings and the ones that we applied. So if we go over here and we pull over the settings that we just applied in the RSSI back, you'll see that the configuration file is simply a diff file with a few modifications. So right here inside the diff file and inside the configuration file is the motor remapping. So the fact that we have the ESC with the orientation with the battery terminal come out the back is not the way that Airbot envisioned it. So we had to remap the motors. It's called motor remapping or resource remapping. And so this is different than the stock. In fact, if you go to the left side, this is the left side configuration file. This is the stock settings right here. And you'll see it's all the same assignments. They're just in a different order on the one that we have for coming out the back. So that's the only difference between the left side and the back configuration files. Now, what this is right here, this is where we essentially assign the motor resources, take all the resources away, clear the motor resources before we reassign them. That's necessary to do when you apply a configuration file. The other thing that we want to look at as we go down through the diff file, you noticed that that when we first updated the firmware, it did not have the gyros were not working. That's because the flight controller has up to 2 gyro possibilities. The first one is an extra one that you could add, but the second one is the built-in gyro. So we had to assign the gyro to use as equaling seconds. So if you didn't do the configuration file, but you wanted to have the gyro work, you would have to execute this command in the CLI. So that's pretty much it from the CLI diff file perspective and how the configuration files work. I just wanted to show that to you before we went on. So we can just hit disconnect here. Then hit reconnect. Okay, so we'll go through the rest of these tabs. Now's a good time to turn on your transmitter. I'm going to assume you've already bound your receiver to your transmitter. If you happen to have a FreeSky receiver and you have not done that yet, you can check down the video description where I did a configuration and setup video on this Jumper T12 using both the XM Plus and the RSSI receiver I have inside this drone. Okay, now here on the ports tab, everything's already set up with the configuration file. Here on UART2, we have the smart audio for the VTX. Here on UART4, we have the ESC telemetry. On UART6 is our serial RX for our S-Bus receiver. And on soft serial 1, because this is an RXSR receiver, it has telemetry, we have smart ports set up. Moving on to configuration. The ESCs are compatible with DShot 1200, so we have that set up. We have 8 kilohertz and 8 kilohertz for the gyro update and the PID loop frequency. We got both the accelerometer and the barometer turned on. Here you have the receiver, so we have the S-Bus type receiver here selected. So here under the serial receiver, we have S-Bus selected, but you also have Spectrum and iBus if you happen to be using FlySky receivers. We have soft serial turned on. We saw that on the ports tab. We have telemetry. We have the OSD, ESC sensor, anti-gravity dynamic filtering. We have DShot beacon turned on. So actually, when we flip our buzzer switch, it'll make the motors beep, and that's what we'll be hearing instead of an actual buzzer. And I think that's everything on the configuration tab. Here on the battery tab, because we're using ESC telemetry, we're going to have the ESC telemetry turned on for the current meter. And that's all that's here. Failsafe, I think these are all defaults. There is a custom tune that's been applied with the configuration file. So here on the receiver tab, what you want to do here is to make sure that all your channels are coming through correctly. So if I move the throttle here, I want to see that go from essentially 1,000 up to about 2,000, and you want to make sure that it's, when I move the throttle, that the throttle bar is actually the one that's changing and not one of the other channels. So if your throttle or any of the channels are not mapped correctly, you simply reorder them here. So if throttle was coming in on aileron, all I would do is switch throttle to aileron and make sure that that's working right. You would have to hit save down here to see the changes, but it doesn't have to reboot. So you just make sure that every one of them are coming through. So there's my yaw. And so pitch is here. Again, 1,000, 2,000. And here's my roll. Okay, so if you're not going to 1,000 to 2,000, you'll need to go into your setup menu on your radio under the output screen and change that. So we also need to make sure our aux switches are working correctly. So I'm using this top one here as aux 1, and this 3-way switch here for aux 2, and this 3-way switch here for aux 3. So probably the last thing to mention here is aux 4. This is the RSSI. So on the XSR receivers, if you don't know how to set that up, you can see that Jumper T12 video that I mentioned before down in the description. But on the XM Plus receivers, this will come over on aux 4. So the way you set this up is you do need to flash a special firmware in order to be able to have that come across on aux 4 on the XM Plus. So let me take you over to the FreeSky receiver download page for the XM Plus. And so you want this firmware right here. This firmware has the RSSI coming over on channel 8, which is aux 4. When you think about, this is essentially channel 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it comes across on aux 4. Also, if you're unsure how to update the firmware on your FreeSky receivers, you can go over here to this website here. Oscar Lang put together a great tutorial that tells you how to do that. Essentially, It involves wiring the receiver to the back of your transmitter. You got to be real careful to make sure that you get the proper order here. And so it has examples of how to do the RSSI, hooking it up, and also further down here is the XM Plus on how to hook it up. But it tells you exactly how to download the firmware, where to put it on the SD card inside your OpenTX receiver or transmitter, and explains the whole process. So here in the Modes tab, aux 1 is assigned to ARM, aux 2 is assigned to angle mode in the top position, horizon with air mode on in the middle position, and acro mode with just air mode on in the bottom position. And aux 3 is beeper for the first position, and turtle mode or flip over after crash in the third position, and both of those off in the top position. If you want to change any of those, you would just simply hit this drop down arrow and pick which aux channel you want to change it to. Make sure you hit save to save your changes. Nothing has been changed on the adjustments or servo tabs, but now we're up to motors. So here is where we're going to test our motor direction. So go ahead and plug in your LiPo. So no props are on. So we'll go ahead and flip this little switch here that'll let us control the motors, and we're going to spin each motor just a little bit to see the direction. So we can see here, motor 1 is supposed to be spinning in this direction. So we'll turn it on. All right, so it's spinning in the correct direction. Now we'll go to motor 2, and it's supposed to be spinning in this direction. All right, so it is not spinning in the right direction, so we're going to need to reverse motor 2. Let's check motor 3. So motor 3 is supposed to be spinning in this direction, and it is spinning in the wrong direction. So it is actually spinning in this direction. So motor 2 and 3 are wrong. Let's check 4. It's supposed to be spinning in this direction, and it is. All right. So we need to reverse motors 2 and 3. So we do not do that inside Betaflight. We do that in BL Heli Suite. So we can disconnect out of Betaflight, close that down, and open BL Heli Suite. So here, first thing we want to do is make sure that the right COM port selected is COM10 for my computer. Again, maybe different for yours, and hit connect. And then we'll read setup. All right, we can see here, this is the default setup. None of them have been reversed yet, but we want to reverse 2 and 3. So we'll go ahead and deselect everything but 2. So this is number 2, and this motor direction here, we simply say reversed, and we'll hit right setup. So it'll write number 2, and then we'll turn on number 3. Again, here's 3 here. Make it reversed, write the setup, and then it's done. And then we can go ahead and select all of them, and we can go ahead and disconnect and reconnect, and that way we'll see all of them at the same time. We'll read setup. There we go. So number 1 is not reversed, normal direction. Number 2 is reversed, number 3 is reversed, and number 4 is normal direction. That's all we have to do here in BL Heli Suite. So we hit disconnect, go back over to Betaflight, click connect, go back to the motors tab, and we'll do it one more time, making sure everything's right now. So we'll do number 1. Okay, it's spinning correctly. 2, up. Now it's spinning this direction, so that's correct. So number 3, we want to spin in this direction. All right, so it's good now. And number 4, we didn't change, just confirming. Okay, it's all good. So now we've got the motors spinning the correct directions. Okay, now to the OSD tab. Now it's a good time to turn on your goggles so we can see any changes that we make. So since this camera also has an OSD, we want to go ahead and turn that off so it doesn't interfere with the Betaflight OSD. So the way you do that is you hold the up arrow down till you get the menu here, and then you just simply turn off all these items that say on, and you hit save. Now you can see that the camera OSD is no longer being shown on the screen. So I'll go ahead and take my goggles over to the computer so I can see the changes that I make. So on my screen, everything's lined up well. But if you need to move any of these, if any of these are off your screen, all you have to do is hold it down and you can move it to a new position. And you can see I just moved the battery voltage up higher here. And if you hit save, it would stay there. So you can rearrange these anywhere you like. There are some differences between PAL and NTSC on how they're laid out on the screen. So you might need to make a few changes, but always just make sure you hit save. We've already pre-selected the certain elements here. You can switch different ones on. You got different types of timers, and you can put those anywhere you want on the screen. Always make sure to hit save or the changes won't take effect. So as a safety feature, Betaflight won't let you arm your quad while the USB cable is connected. So we're going to go ahead and hit disconnect here. Unplug the USB cord. Go ahead and unplug it. Plug it back in. Okay. And then we can arm it. It's armed. You can see I can control the motors here. And then I have my different modes. This is stability mode. You see it there at the bottom. Then I have horizon mode, and the props are spinning now because I got air mode on as well. And that is acro mode, or just nothing but air mode. And we can see that we have battery voltage and cell voltage in the lower left-hand corner, flight time in the middle with flight mode, and then current draw or amps in the lower right-hand corner, along with milliamp hours consumed. In the upper left-hand corner, this is your VTX. So if you want to change your settings here for your VTX, you can disarm, and it gives you some stats for your flight. And then you come up on the center stick here to the left, and then you go to features, and then you go to VTX TR, that stands for tramp, and then you can change different settings here. So you have your band, you can change it to Fat Sharks, all the bands. So you can do all of this through smart audio. You can change your channels, and it shows your frequency, what the channels associated with. You can change your power here up to 600. I'll leave it on 25 for doing the testing here. And then you hit set here. If you change something, you confirm it, and you can go back, and you can change all kinds of features within here, which I won't go into great detail in, but you have all kinds of features you can change within Betaflight features as well. Hit exit, and now you're back out to the main screen. Also, so that up at the top is showing race band, and then channel 5, and then power level 1, which is associated with the 25 milliwatts. And then you have RSSI next, and then the craft name. In the upper right-hand corner, you have altitude. So now it's ready to put on props and take it out for a test flight. So that concludes the last part of the video series. Thanks for watching.